What's going on, people? This is Kid Shardy Gaming Nation. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how did Black America really respond to Marcus Garvey and his Pan-African vision, right? The misconception is that, Jamaica didn't accept Marcus Garvey, or, the vague surface level comments made from FBA that, Jamaicans didn't accept Marcus Garvey. He couldn't get it going off, get it rocking off in Jamaica. And there's reasons behind that. There's an explanation behind that don't really get told. And how, they embrace Marcus Garvey. There's also nuances behind that, right? Because the working class Black American accepted Marcus Garvey. Because Marcus Garvey, that's where he come from. His family and himself were working class Blacks in Jamaica. So he can speak to the working class people, right? So that's going to be enticing to the working class Black American. But when it comes to the elite Black Americans like W. Du Bois, who were communists and such, they're not going to like him. Same thing in Jamaica, right? You have elite class brown elite Blacks that don't like Blacks like Marcus Garvey, who are dark-skinned, and talk about liberation and freedom from the slave master. You feel me? So you have that, a lot of that going on too, right? So we're going to break that down today. So first of all, was Pan-Africanism in Jamaica already? So we're going to go through this. Jamaica was already accustomed to Pan-African and Black nationalist thinking before Garvey. Absolutely yes. From 1830 straight to 18th century, into the late 1800s, Jamaica had a strong culture of Ethiopianism, belief in the African liberation and biblical destiny, Pan-African identity, pro-Black political resistance, Black autonomy, and self-rule movement. Proto-Rastafari thought before Rastafari formally existed. So Rastafari thought was there before the movement got pushed by Leonard P. Howell, right? So it was already there. Even the Christianity practiced by most ex-slaves had African-centered worldview, with constant reference to Zion, Ethiopia, African redemption, divine Black destiny. So Marcus Garvey started speaking in 1914. Jamaica already had a cultural foundation for his message, right? Who are the people that before Garvey that laid the foundation? 1800s Black nationalist preachers and leaders. Reverend Samuel Sharp, Baptist preacher, led the 1831 Christmas Rebellion, pushing for Black liberations. His teaching promoted African dignity and resistance to white rule. Sharp influenced the entire political consciousness of Jamaican Blacks. Ethiopianness, autonomy mindset already active. Paul Bogle, leader of the Morant Bay Rebellion, preached Black justice, independence, and resistance. Saw the Jamaican Black population as a distinct people with rights. Early form of political Black nationalism, right? George William Gordon, politician, advocated for Black self-representation and land rights, championed dignity for African-descended people. Executed along Bogle, created political roots for Garvey and self-government ideas. So these things are already going on in Jamaica, right? Ethiopianists and Pan-African religious think leaders. Edward Wilmot Bladen, not Jamaican, but highly influential in Caribbean, including Jamaica. Father of Pan-Africanism, promoted Africa for Africans decades before Garvey, believed Africans should reclaim pride, identity, and civilization. Widely read in Caribbean newspapers. Garvey was directly influenced by Bladen, right? So let's look up who Edward Wilmot Bladen was, right? Edward Wilmot Bladen. So I think I showed him in a prior video. All right. Mouthful. Move ad. So this is who he was. Right? So you can say he was Caribbean or he was from Liberia. Was an American liberal educator, diplomat and politician who was prominently active in West Africa. Born in the Danish West Indies, he joined the waves of Black immigrants from the Americas who migrated to Liberia, right? So he was known. So this is okay. Black Post. Elmer Whitmer Bladen, widely known as the father of Pan-Africanism, was born August 1832 in St. Thomas in what we are. Oh, so I'm not. Hold on, let me share it. All right. So Bladen was the third of 7 children. Was born to Romeo and Juliet Bladen. All right. In St. Thomas and what we are now the U.S. Virgin Islands. So he was born in St. Thomas, or U.S. Virgin Islands. This is his history right here. All right, so that's that, right? So looked into that. Let's go back to StreamYard. Let's add back there. So that's who that he was, right? African-centered revivalist pastor. In Jamaica, 1800s, Revival Zion, Pukimania preachers constantly thought African ancestors, Ethiopian prophecy, Black consciousness, returned to Mother Africa. These are among the earliest forms of spiritual Pan-Africanism, right? Early intellectuals and journalists. Robert Love, Bohemian-born, settled in Jamaica, ran the Jamaica Advocate, African Identity, Black Self-Pride, Anti-Colonial Politics. First, he attacked racism in colonial Jamaica. Garvey read his work as a young man. Garvey took many ideas from Love. Dr. Joseph Robert Love, often confused with Robert Love, but same influence, another intellectual force pushing Black pride and uplift. Native Baptist movement, Black-led, right? Focused on African history and liberation, prominent from the late 1700s to 18th centuries. This movement heavily shaped Garvey's worldview, right? So, Maoist traditions, African spiritual systems that preserved identity and cultural memory, reinforced belief in African spiritual superiority, kept African consciousness alive through slavery and colonialism. So what did Garvey do that was different? Before Garvey, Jamaica had African consciousness, Ethiopia. And now it's my personal belief that a lot of the Caribbean Blacks that you see in the islands from Trinidad to Jamaicans, I believe they're already there. And I think we got tricked into this African thinking. I believe a lot of the Black people that you see in the islands came actually from the Americas. Like we see in the diaspora. I think they came from the Americas. But for the sake of argument whatsoever, I just use what they tell us, right? Before Garvey, Jamaica had African consciousness, Ethiopianism, Black nationalism, anti-colonial movements, spiritual African pride. But Garvey did something no one else in the Caribbean or America had done before him. He industrialized Pan-Africanism because he used capitalism to do it, right? Turning it from a spiritual and political belief into business, newspapers, shipping lines, worldwide chapters, uniform, mass rallies, economic institutions. He globalized it in Jamaica, Cuba, Trinidad, Panama, U.S., Canada, Britain, Africa, Central America. He created a worldwide Black identity movement. He fused Jamaican traditions, Ethiopian prophecy, African pride, Black political resistance with international mass organization. All right, so these are the local influences. Yes, Caribbean Black people, especially Jamaicans, had their own forms of African pride, African identity, and African liberation thought long before the United States developed anything similar. It did not start in America. In fact, American early Black nationalist movements were heavily influenced by Caribbean thinkers, right? Like Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was influenced by the Haitian Revolution, right? And I'm going to show that in another video. All right. African spiritual intention. Jamaica kept strong African religious and cultural systems, Mila, Communia, Pokimania, Revival Zion, African Baptist traditions, right? These emphasize African ancestors, Ethiopian prophecy, Black chosenness. U.S. did not have anything this cultural African on mass level. All right. So this is that. Meanwhile, in America, black people dealing with outlawed African religions, forced assimilations, legal punishments for African culture practice, no mass African spiritual systems. The African identity that survived in the U.S. was present, but not as strong or continuous as in the Caribbean, right? We're getting Caribbean newspapers, Caribbean preachers. And they were heavily influenced by Caribbean immigrants, Caribbean newspapers, Caribbean preachers, Caribbean intellects like Edward Bladen, right? I don't believe in going back to back to Africa. This is just what the thought was at the time, right? This is what the social think tank was at the time, right? Edward Bladen, Marcus Garvey, Henry Sylvester Williams, W. Adolph Roberts, Robert Love. Meanwhile, U.S. black leaders had Booker T. Washington and W. Du Bois. Developed their Pan-African ideas later and in dialogue with Caribbean thinkers. Du Bois himself attended Williams' Pan-African Conference, which was started by a Trinidadian, right? So even W. Du Bois, right? America's earliest black nationalist movements often came from Caribbean influence. Even the early black back to Africa movements in America were shaped by Caribbean-born ministers, black Caribbean-led churches, Caribbean newspapers, Caribbean immigrants, and black American communities. This is why you see strong Caribbean influence among early black American intellectual circles in Harlem. Bottom line, African identity, African pride, Pan-African spirituality, and black nationalist thinking existed in Jamaica and the Caribbean long before the United States developed a similar tradition. Many early Pan-African leaders came from the Caribbean, not America. Much of the black America's later Pan-African thought was influenced by Caribbean thinkers, right? So we're going to go into this phase. Jamaicans did not fully support Garvey, and we're going to go into why. When Garvey founded the UNIA in Kingston in 1914, the organization was tiny, fewer than 100 people at first. Most Jamaicans were poor, overworked, and politically cautious due to colonial surveillance. Educated Jamaicans, the brown-colored middle class, thought Garvey was too radical, too loud, too focused on race, and too anti-colonial. Some black Jamaicans appreciated his energy, but didn't grasp his global vision yet. So Jamaica, early Garveyism grew very slowly. So yes, Garvey's UNI movement started in Jamaica, but the Jamaicans were hesitant to accept it because you got to remember, as I said earlier on in the video or in this presentation, that there were a lot of rebellions that started and then they were squashed. You feel me? So now at this point, you know what I'm saying, they were under surveillance by colonial rule. And then at the same time, you have what you call the brown, middle class, colored people. Like you have like Kamala Harris, right? That's why I didn't like Kamala Harris, because I know the history. Kamala Harris is what you consider the brown elite that don't like dark-skinned black people in Jamaica, right? So that class would see dark-skinned black people doing something organizing, and then they would go report that to the colonial masters. You know what I'm saying? And at this time, there was a lot of shit going on in Jamaica's history at this time, right? So this is the proper context of that, of why Jamaican blacks in Jamaica didn't rally behind Marcus Garvey as yet. It wasn't that they didn't like what he was saying. It was that they were caught between colonial rule, and then they were caught between, brown, middle class, octoroon, quadroon, different kind of runes of black people that they have to worry about. So there's a lot of shit going on. And I'm going to go into, because a lot of FBA say that Jamaica was not developed. You had train and railways in Jamaica. You had a lot of modern day, which at the time, technological advances going on in Jamaica. So it was developing, right? Jamaica elite and the middle class mostly rejected him. The colored class, who held social and political influence, saw Garvey as a dangerous troublemaker, too focused on black autonomy. Why you don't want to have black autonomy? A threat to their relationship with the British. An educated black man trying to step above his station. Woo! That sounds like communism to me, or elitism to me. They did not support him. Some even openly mocked him in newspapers, calling him ignorant, too African, misguided, unrealistic. This pushed Garvey to leave Jamaica for America in the 1916, which a lot of y'all already did the video on this. Marcus Garvey was a Sigma. When Marcus Garvey said, the Negro wasn't invited to the table of civilization, but we shall build our own table, right? That's a Sigma thought. Working class Black Jamaicans liked the spirit, but didn't understand the plan yet. Garvey spoke to dock workers, pollers, farmers, domestic workers, urban poor, because that's where he came from. That was his early life. These people responded to his boldness, pride, African consciousness, anti-colonial tone, but they did not yet have the organization, the money, or political freedom to support him in large numbers. Garvey himself said Jamaicans were too dormant because colonial oppression kept them fearful of political activism. And like I said before, when you have a higher class of Black people called the Brown elite reporting every action you did, and then you have prior rebellions to this that got squashed, it can kind of break your spirit, right? Garvey's mission only exploded after he succeeded in America. So this is true, right? When Garvey went to America, it did have more success. The reception was completely different. He returned as a global figure, a man who built the largest Black movement in history, a hero of the African diaspora, a symbol of Black pride and dignity. Then Jamaicans embraced him massively. Jamaica finally saw him as a national leader, their international champion, a prophet of Black liberation. Large crowds greeted him, and later he became Jamaican nationalist hero, right? Early reception, lukewarm, skeptical, even dismissive. Middle class rejected him, working class liked him but didn't fully support him yet. UNIA remained small. After the U.S. success, Garvey became a beloved hero. Jamaicans embraced him. He became the most important figures in Jamaican history, right? So that is absolutely true. Jamaica, Marcus Garvey movement didn't kick off until it hit the U.S. But I gave you the reasons why it didn't kick off, right? He had to deal with a brown skin, light skin, middle class elite, and then the regular poor Black people who were struggling to make something had to also worry about colonial oppression, right? Why Jamaica didn't support Garvey earlier? People love Garvey now, but early Jamaica didn't support him. Here's why, right? Colonial Jamaica was terrified of political trouble. Jamaica in the early 1990s was tightly controlled by British colony. Rebellions like Sam Sharp and Bogle were still in memory. The British punished rebellious Black movements hard. Most Jamaicans believe if you speak too loudly, you'll get killed or starved out. Garvey's message was loud, unapologetic, and anti-colonial. That scared people. You notice that you always need a Sigma somewhere. A Sigma is always necessary in your social hierarchy because he gonna fucking make noise, right? Jamaica had a brown mixed elite class who had better education, held more local jobs, controlled newspapers, sided with the British for social status. They did not want a strong Black working class leader rising up, so they called Garvey ignorant, too Black, unrefined, or an upstart who didn't know his place. This middle class was powerful enough to influence public opinion against Garvey. Right? Working class Black Jamaicans liked him, but didn't think he could win. Right? They didn't believe a poor printer with no proper education could defeat colonial rule. All right? So Jamaica lacked a big population or money to fuel its movement. Jamaica was small, poor, rural, and not industrialized yet. There wasn't enough money, infrastructure, density of Black urban workers. And to spark a mass movement like UNIA would later become. Right? So were mentally colonized. He believed many Jamaicans didn't believe in their own greatness, were conditioned to see Britain as superior, lacked political unity. He famously said he had to leave Jamaica to awaken Jamaica. And it did work, right? How did Black Americans receive Garvey when he arrived in the U.S. 1960s to the 1920s? Black Americans, you did not receive him well either. All right? Black Americans did not fully support Garvey at first either, but America was a better environment for his movement. Here's a real breakdown. Early reception in America mixed, not immediate love. Black working class Americans loved him instantly, similar to Jamaican class, right? Black working class connected with him immediately because he spoke boldly, he spoke with fire, He wasn't scared of white people. He preached black pride, jobs, businesses, and unity. He offered leadership in a country where racism was brutal. The group became his core support, right? Black elites, Du Bois, NAACP, educated class, same shit. Many black intellectuals and leaders thought Garvey was too aggressive, too African, too separatist, too focused on race, lacking formal education, a demagogue who might embarrass black Americans. W. Du Bois and the NAACP were openly hostile to Garvey early on. Du Bois called him a little fat black man, a lunatic, dangerous for the race. The black elite preferred integration, gradual progress or progressivism, respectable politics, assimilation into white society. Same shit. Garvey preached the opposite. Some black American ministers attacked him too. Many black churches felt Garvey threatened by Garvey's huge crowds, charisma, African-centered message, ability to lead people outside traditional religious control. Some pastors opposed him out of fear of losing influence. But America gave Garvey the population and freedom to grow. Unlike Jamaica, America had millions of black people, urban centers, newspapers, factories, racial anger, migration from the South, black soldiers returning from WWE, World War I, frustrated with racism, right? So, yeah. Because you got to remember, America is a big place. Jamaica is small, right? America was ready for Garvey-type message. So even though these rejected him, the mass embraced him. UNIA exploded into 6 million members globally, 900 divisions, newspapers, business, Black Star Line. This made him the largest black leader in world history, right? Why Jamaica didn't support Garvey early? Fair British colonial punishment, brown elite class blocked him. Poor Jamaicans didn't believe he could win. No money, or urban population to grow a large movement. Mental colonialism and social pressure. Jamaica respected him after he succeeded in America, right? How black Americans received him. Working class loved him from day one. Black elite rejected him, feared him, opposed him. America's size plus racism plus urbanization allowed his movement to explode, right? United States, black leaders who rejected Garvey. W. Du Bois, already told you about him. James Weldon Johnson, the NAACP, saw Garvey as a reckless and extremist, opposed the Black Star Line, supported the government prosecution of Garvey. Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen, the messenger. Socialist intellectuals. Remember, socialism does not like capitalism, right? And Garvey was a capitalist. Called Garvey a reactionary fraud, said he was deceiving black workers, accused him of dictatorship, mocked his uniform and titles. Randolph later admitted he underestimated Garvey's power among the people. Cyril Briggs, founder of the African Blood Brotherhood, communist-oriented leader, initially attacked Garvey as a capitalist, later formed a temporary alliance, then split again. Black pastors who opposed Garvey. Large number of pastors saw Garvey as pulling members out of the church, threat to their authority, to political, to African, to militant. Here are some documented pastoral opponents. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Sr., pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. He was cautious of Garvey and refused to support him. He criticized the Black Star Line in the UNIA Masonic tone. Not outright enemy, but opposed and distant. The Harlem Minister Alliance, a coalition of black clergy who warned their congregations not to join Garvey's movement, not to invest in the Black Star Line, not to follow false movements of African redemption. This group included leaders from AME Zion, Baptist congregations, Holiness Church, which is so funny because we have a bunch of AME churches out here in Cambridge Heights. Baptist Robert Williams, AME Zion, criticized Garvey's separatism and bold attacks on established black leadership. Many AME bishops, the AME leadership believed they should be the spokesperson for black people, not an outsider like Garvey. They saw him as competition. All right. By politicians who opposed Garvey. Clarence Darrow and other black political moderates, these leaders preferred integration and viewed Garvey as too radical, too anti-white, too loud, too separatist. Summary: who rejected Garvey? Brown class, middle class editors, colonial line elites, conservative Baptists, Anglican, and Presbyterian ministers, professional class in Kingston. All right. In America, black intellectuals, W. Du Bois, NAACP, black pastors, black politicians. Y'all can pause this in the video and read this if y'all want to. I'll give you a couple seconds. All right. So, yes. So, in closing, yes, it is absolutely true. Jamaica did not accept Marcus Garvey in the beginning, but the context for that, or the nuance to it, or the information needed to it was that A, didn't have enough urban centers, nor was it big enough, and the people didn't believe it because they already had rebellions against British colonial rule, and they got squashed. And then at the same time, you had black people who were brown-skinned middle-class elite that was also reporting everything that was being done to the British colonial masters. Black Americans didn't accept him either. The same mirrored thing. We have black Americans who were brown, because W. Du Bois is brown skin, right? Churches didn't accept Marcus Garvey. They rejected him, told their people not to accept him. You had certain black Americans that was cool with the government pushing against his movement, right? So what the common ground is that you have black people who were of the working poorer class. Like you had Jamaican poorer class and black American poorer class that liked Marcus Garvey and accepted his message, right? Now, the difference is that you have more people and more urban centers and factory stuff in America than you did have in Jamaica. So that's the difference, right? And, you know, America's big. Black population in America is big. They're spread out all over the place. So it's a lot easier to recruit followers and people, especially if you go places like the North and Harlem, where it's not as heavy in Jim Crow energy like in the South. Understand? But yeah, in closing message, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the video. I think Caribbean blacks or Jamaican blacks, I think regardless of our contributions to American space and the American black identity, what is going to happen is they're going to try to nitpick and figure out ways to disqualify us from the identity. So what we need to do here and now is do a reset and leave the black American space alone, not America itself, but leave black America alone and be separate and stand apart and stand on our own 2 feet, right? We don't speak on black American politics. We speak on Caribbean American politics. We don't speak on, whenever you see a black person arguing with a white person, let them go back and forth. We stay out of that, right? We stay out of the reparation conversation. We stay out of the slavery conversation because that's unique to black Americans. We don't get ourselves involved in that. Whenever we do something here in America, some kind of achievement in tech, some kind of achievement in finance, some kind of achievement in innovation, gaming, whatever. We say that, we don't say black American invention or African American. We say that we are Jamaican American. Why? Because we don't want to cosplay them. We don't want to be disrespectful for them. And we don't want to erase ourselves in the black American space or African American space, right? So we want to be a separate on our own, part of the black diaspora, because what they don't want to admit that we have a lot of creative energy here too. And we added our creative energy to the black American pot since slavery, but they don't want to admit that. So moving forward, we reset. We leave what was and move on to create what is going to be new moving forward. So let's move towards that. You feel me? That's why I came up with the Caribbean Constitution, and I'm going to do it again, another video of it. And, you know, so yeah. Anyway, this is Kish Yardy Gaming Nation. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the video.